Hello, casual, pro, and potential WoW players alike. I am Ricky from Worst Friends Play, and today I wanted to go over a recent topic that came to my mind, mainly because I achieved a small dream in getting my wife to agree to play World of Warcraft with me. This wasn't the first time that I had tried to teach someone to play World of Warcraft, but it was the first time I had actually cared if that person kept playing World of Warcraft. This came with a few challenges that I was not necessarily prepared to teach, but one of the most obvious things for me is that my wife has practically no experience with video gaming in general. The most common issue being that when I'd hand her a controller of any kind for any of the systems that I own, I could ask her to press something as simple as the B button, and I'd be immediately met with, "Where's the B button?" So obviously trying to play World of Warcraft and teach her things that have to do with keybinds and using an entire keyboard to its full potential was out of the question. What I decided to do was make a quick video kind of going over the thought process I had when it came to teaching her and how to be an effective player while staying a clicker in World of Warcraft. Now, obviously, the first challenge that most clickers tend to have playing melee. The reason why is that melee is very fast-paced. Most of the time you have to keep moving, and this can conflict with the idea of using your mouse to do all of your attacks because your keyboard is maintaining your movement for you because you can't click and use your mouse to move at the same time. The way that I've always played, being a clicker myself, is by using a lot of add-ons. But really, the only three important add-ons that I think are almost necessary to be a successful clicker would be Bartender, which is how you see all of my miscellaneous buttons everywhere all over my screen. Weak Auras 2, which is how I maintain timers and such over certain dots that normally would be a pain in the ass to try to keep track of. When you're clicking, you are constantly pretty much looking at where your mouse is to see what button you're pressing. And then the third add-on being for pretty much if you exclusively are playing healer for any reason, using Healbot, which essentially puts a bunch of bars on the grid for each player in your team and or raid, and allows you to click them in different combinations in order to heal them in different ways. So anyone that's used Healbot could imagine that it, is a very hard habit to break once you've played with almost nothing but Healbot for the longest time, and then someone says play DPS, and you just want to click because that's what you've always done. So what I'm going to show you here is just one of my, many characters that I tend to have at high level since I've been playing for so long. And what you see here is I tend to have all of my buttons here in the somewhat center of my screen. It, for the most part, won't obscure my character because I don't play super zoomed in or anything. I'm still able to, for the most part, use all of my Q, W, E, A, S, and D keys to move around and strafe around as I wish. As I'm sitting here staring at where my mouse is, whether it's on Shred or going to Brutal Strike, Ferocity, all that crap, is still all entirely in my peripheral, so I can maintain where my buttons are, where my mouse is, and where I currently am as far as attacking. Now you'll see that I have a few little orange bars over my buttons and stuff. That's all done using Weak Auras, and I'd probably have to make a separate video on how I manipulate Weak Auras to maintain all of the information. But as you can see, I use RIP, and it shows me a literal timer over my RIP button, so that I know that I don't need to press that button again for at least the next 15 seconds. And I can just go through my normal rotation that I would learn to do on my own with any class and decide, what is the best way to lay these buttons out as far as where my mind tends to default to when I think of certain things. So you'll notice that most of my finishers are all going to be right here. All of my basic attacks that happen very commonly, my filler attacks and whatnot for every class, are always going to be right here in the center. And then certain attacks that are important or buffs and stuff that are just used in, general sense of timing are going to be off to this side. The most important, I think, as far as a clicker, to just not fall behind in terms of effectiveness or ability to enjoy the game and not feel like you are just underwhelmingly powerful, or to not feel like you are just completely underpowered, is to kind of get a sense of where your UI is at, put it to where you feel it's most comfortable for you, and just sort of play with it. I've had to redo my UI completely to find sort of a UI that I like for every single class and almost every single spec. Whether I'm playing a healer, whether I'm playing a damage dealer, or a tank, my UI now looks the same across every class and every spec, and I have every class and every spec. The only thing that really changes is for certain classes like Rogue or Mage that don't have any healing abilities, I can just turn Healbot off, and it's just less clutter on my UI in general. Another trick that you may have noticed, which I'll show you on my next character, something that you can or can't use depending on your preference that makes melee attacking a little bit easier and a little bit more in time with what some people might expect WoW to behave as, especially if they've never played the game before. One thing that a lot of beginners aren't going to know about that have to eventually be taught to them, and they'll be like, what the hell does that mean, is macros. Basically what this allows you to do is create specific buttons that do specific tasks that aren't default. For melee characters, I use certain things that I keep on my general so that I can access that code from any character at any time and then customize it for that attack. Now what this does differently is normally when you have, whether you're a spellcaster, melee, whatever, you have to pick your target, whether it's through clicking it or using your tab target button, which for me is R, but for some people they keep it on tab. What this allows you to do, as you can see, I can tab that button here and go back and forth between targets. So if I started to press an attack right now and I didn't have my macro on, it would just keep saying it's out of range. And what that does is, normally that's not an issue, it just means you get into range and then you use Devastate, and when you can't use it anymore, it will stop using it because the enemy, for whatever reason, has moved out of your melee range. The problem with this is that I always was annoyed by the fact that I was surrounded by melee, and one of them, for whatever reason, decides to reposition itself or decides to move away, and I'm still sitting there clicking on Devastate by default for whatever reason, because I'm filthy casual and I'm not paying attention. I wanted it to automatically target something else in melee if the thing I was trying to hit with a specific melee attack was not in melee range. So that's what this macro pretty much does. The benefits to it, and then there's some downfalls to it, and I'll show those both to you now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pull a bunch of random things. So here you can see my one key is set to Devastate, but it's a macro Devastate. And you see how as I click it, when I adjust my camera, it changes the target for me to whatever is upmost in front of me at the time. So for whatever reason, if I was to move something out of the way, or if one of them was to try to run away, it would just automatically affix itself to the next in-range combatant and attack them for me, so that I don't have to sit there and try to tab target to whatever specific thing is happening. The reason that can get really annoying is because sometimes you're going to have things in melee range, and you're going to have things that are at 15 yards, 20 yards, whatever, and when you tab target, it's going to cycle through all of them, and that can just be annoying in general, to wait for your target and then you accidentally click one tab too many, and now you're cycling through again and whatnot. And this one doesn't have that issue. This one just straight up will attack the thing that is most in front of you and allow you to always, pretty much keep as much damage going on as possible. This is extremely useful when you're leveling up by yourself or just questing in general, because you're not worried about, focused and maintaining specific targets, or always targeting the the boss of the raid or whatever, things like that. The other thing that it unfortunately does is, for whatever reason, however it's programmed through Blizzard, sometimes it will try to prioritize focus on things that are casting against you. So if something's trying to use a frostbolt on you and it's in front of you but it's a distance away, and there's something directly in front of you, the character that is casting frostbolt will claim your target most of the time. So you either charge in on it, or you have to manually, adjust yourself to not be looking at him, but you'd be looking at the enemy that you're wanting to hit in general. And then of course the macro will target it specifically so that you're hitting the thing in front of you, as opposed to the thing that's way off in the distance just casting spells against you. That's a bad thing sometimes, because it gets you into a point where you have to get used to moving your camera around. But for me, that tends to make me feel more like I'm playing a melee-specific type of character. The good thing is that it pretty much announces when someone is specifically targeting you with the spell cast. So if you're in PvP and you're deciding on, as you run towards the enemy group, you're deciding on who am I going to, swing on, who am I going to charge in on or whatever. As soon as someone starts casting something on you, any kind of caster, then that's going to be who immediately becomes your target because they're in the group in front of you, but they're the ones targeting you. And then you can choose to charge and prioritize that person. I tend to use it for most of my melee specific attacks. And then for things like Thunderclap, AoE attacks like Revenge, or ranged attacks like Heroic Throw, I don't need to bother with that macro. I can use those things specifically with tab targeting. The other thing that I guess a lot of people might not realize that makes clicking viable is the global cooldown. What this means is that once you get used to being a clicker, 99% of the abilities that you use in the game are going to go off of a global cooldown. So when I press my shield slam, all my other spells have to wait at least 1 second before I'm allowed to do them anyways. So that 1 second is the time that I would need to specifically move between all of my abilities that are here in this tiny radius that are the most commonly used. So I wouldn't be any faster or any more effective by using the keybinds that I have on these. It would just simply be a different way of playing. And most commonly, other players that you're playing with aren't going to notice the difference. Because you still don't want to do certain things like backpedaling. Backpedaling is a big no-no, especially in PvP. It's much more effective to move your camera around actively. But since you're already clicking with your left click button all the time, it becomes pretty easy to just move up real quick, move your camera, and then go back down to your clicks. And then using the Q and E key to strafe around while you do that. And then I have my middle click set to most targeted spells. So in this case, a targeted spell would be something that has a target reticule somewhere on the ground. For warriors, that's Heroic Leap. So I middle click my mouse and choose where I want to jump. And it's essentially like clicking the button, except I'm not actually having to click here and then click up here. I just press middle click and I go there. But you could use this for other things like Druids' little healing circle that they do, or Shaman's Healing Rain. Those are all targeted spells that I can just middle click and place where I want without having to actually move my mouse to any of those buttons, which allows me to not have those buttons in this space that is basically my vision range for allowing myself to be a clicker, use all of my necessary abilities depending on my class and spec, and not lose visual sight of what I'm doing. And that's pretty much it. I think that's a pretty effective way to play WoW. I've never had any problem playing. I've done raiding in every expansion since vanilla. I've PvP'd as much as I care to, and I've never necessarily had a problem with it. And obviously I've had to refine a lot of these habits and stuff over time to get better, because usually the biggest challenge you're going to have as a clicker is in PvP. But obviously, to be the best at PvP, you're going to have to play like the best play, which is to go with keybinds and stuff. But if you just like doing random battlegrounds, you're not going for high arena ratings and whatnot, then playing as a clicker is totally viable, and it's possible. And you can still enjoy the game, be successful. Yeah, and you don't have to retrain your hands to do something that you may have never had to do for any other game ever. If you're that person, I would just tell you to be a clicker. I do it. I'm teaching my wife to do it. We both enjoy the game a lot. It hasn't stopped me from doing anything in the game that I've wanted to do. And that's including all end game content and whatnot. And I think that nobody should be ashamed of being a clicker. It's just another way to play the game. You play the way you're most comfortable, and for me it's the most comfortable way to play, because it's a lot easier to put all that wear and tear on one finger than it is to constantly mix and twist my fingers on my other hand, getting used to key bindings and whatnot. Hope this helps. If you want more information, of course, you can always leave a comment and I'll try to answer the best that I can. Please keep in mind while watching this video that obviously, like I said, this is mainly for my wife's information and anyone else like her that is thinking about coming into WoW, but may be overwhelmed when you see hardcore WoW players and the way that they play and how many buttons they have to map and know and customize with keybinds and whatnot, that a lot of that is generally unnecessary to play the game successfully and enjoyably. If you're interested in any other like tips and tricks and stuff of generally my setup you see here and how I use it effectively and what add-ons I use and whatnot, then just let me know and maybe I'll make a video about that and how to set up weak auras or how to set up specifically your bartender to look like mine and whatnot. But that's it. Thanks for watching.